I'm Joey Haskins, and welcome back to You've Never Seen, in which I showcase a movie you've probably never seen before. And welcome to our 75th episode. As with the other milestone episodes, we're going to be looking at something that relates to my film upbringing and a film that I heavily critique. Or for today's episode, films. DC Comics, one of two most prominent comic companies in America, has a pretty concrete set of faces for their company: Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman. No matter what era of the publication you're looking at, DC's Trinity are always going to be there. However, on the other side of that, in Marvel Comics, it's not as concrete. Depending on who's popular, characters will be switched out, from the Hulk and Captain America, or Iron Man and Wolverine, or Thor and Captain Marvel. But even with all those changes, one hero does manage to stay in the forefront, and that is Spider-Man. Spider-Man is, as many of you know, Peter Parker, who was bitten by a radioactive spider and given the powers of the arachnid. For years, Spider-Man has remained one of the most profitable and well-known characters of the company. Many generations grew up with the character, so naturally he has a presence in the media. From several shows, video games, and books, Peter has grown a devoted fan base over the years, but it took a big step forward in the 2000s. Although a film had been in development for a while, it was fast-tracked when the first X-Men movie made big money. The big thing about that is that Marvel, in order to avoid bankruptcy in the late 20th century, had sold the film rights to several of their characters to other studios, with Spider-Man being sold to Sony. So we'll be mentioning them a lot today as we dive in and look at all of the live-action Spider-Man films. Now, for a character as beloved as Spider-Man is, this video may ruffle a couple of feathers. So let's get some limitations of yours truly out of the way first. Number 1. I don't think we've gotten the best live-action Spider-Man film yet. I think we can all agree that Into the Spider-Verse is the best Spider-Man film so far, but as far as live action goes, it hasn't happened yet. And number 2, while I do like Spider-Man, I'm not a huge fan of his like everyone else. I'm more of a DC guy than I am a Marvel guy anyway. Now, there are some runs of specific characters that I do like, but when it comes to multiple comic runs for multiple characters, there are only 4 that I actually like. I like She-Hulk, Deadpool, Daredevil, and a multitude of X-Men books. Those are the Marvel heroes I'm partial to, so if I'm critical of Spider-Man, that is the limitation of me as a critic. And if anybody has some hot takes on Spider-Man, it's this guy. One last thing. We're going to be talking about 8 movies today, so there's going to be a lot of summarizing. We're just going to cover the broad strokes of each movie, though, and see how they are. We've wasted enough time now. Let's jump into the first trilogy of Spider-Man movies. Also, spoilers for all of these films, so you've been warned. Now, the first film originally had James Cameron directing and writing it, and from what I hear, it was weird. So he was gradually phased out of the project as Sony went through a slew of other directors before landing on Sam Raimi. Raimi has directed several films before, in particular the Evil Dead films. I can only describe his type of filmmaking as bizarre, which in something like Evil Dead is great, but in Spider-Man, it's alright. This is the first time I'm watching all these films in over a decade, and watching the first one, Raimi is very restrained in his making of this film. It doesn't have all of his usual techniques. There are a couple of instances, but the first film treats itself like it's special. And it is special. It is the first Spider-Man movie, after all. While watching it, I couldn't help but feel it was a lot like Superman the movie. That film plainly establishes pretty much everything you need to know about that character. Spider-Man also establishes everything you need to know. His origin, powers, and extensive supporting cast, including Uncle Ben, Aunt May, Mary Jane Watson, Harry Osborn, J. Jonah Jameson, and of course, Norman Osborn, the Green Goblin. It tells you pretty much everything you need to know about the character and what he's about. My problems with it are, well, more encompassing of the whole trilogy, but one of my biggest things is this film should have been longer. A good extra 15 or 20 minutes would have been great and would have made the film not feel like it's a little rushed. We don't get a whole lot with Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin, who's kind of in the middle of going full crazy and not. And Kirsten Dunst, although a good actor, does not do a lot in this film, nor the other two. She's very passive as a love interest. And Tobey Maguire's Peter is kind of a nothing character. He's not good, he's not bad, he's just there. No real arc or emotion, it's just, he's Spider-Man, so like him. And also, his webs are made from his body rather than in the comics, which he makes on his own. It's a small detail, but it does eliminate the idea that Peter is a good scientist. But overall, the film is alright. Sam Raimi did a good job of introducing the world to this character, and he made over $800 million. So naturally, the second one goes bigger. And many people consider Spider-Man 2 to be one of the best movies on the webhead and one of the best superhero films, period. I disagree. For one, these Spider-Man movies are structured very weirdly, especially this one. It feels like certain things that happen earlier in the film should happen later, and stuff that happens later should have happened earlier. In this film, Sam goes full Raimi. Bizarre shots, horror elements, this is the Sam Raimi I'm used to. He surprisingly makes the villain in this film, Dr. Octopus, played by Alfred Molina, scary. And that's one of the biggest positives of this film. Molina's Ock is great. He's given way more time than Dafoe did and shows a greater opposition to Peter. The other biggest positive of this film is the action. It's a big step up from the first one and probably the best action of all these films. But that's kind of where it stops for me. This film also adapts one of the most popular and most important Spider-Man stories, Spider-Man No More. And if you know the storyline, it feels weird to me to introduce such a monumental point in Spider-Man history in the second film. It kind of feels like, I don't know, killing Superman in your second Superman film. Yep, I just compared Spider-Man 2 to Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. Told you I was going to have some hot takes. So why do people say this is one of the best? I think personally it has to do with nostalgia. These films were the first of their kind, so the bar was set pretty high. But now that it's been raised more, I think these films aren't as good as people remember them to be. Gladly, nobody thinks that way about Spider-Man 3. The third and final film in the Raimi trilogy is not just bad, it's laughably bad. Again, the structure in this film is weird. We're just out of nowhere introduced to new characters and new elements. The biggest of which is the symbiote, which just appears with no real explanation. The symbiote in the comics makes Peter lash out and act irrationally. In Spider-Man 3, he does this. And he's not the only one in this film who acts weird. The most sincere actor in the film is probably Thomas Hayden Church as Sandman. He has an arc in the movie that isn't treated well for a good character, but the effects on him are impressive. I wish I could say the same though for Venom. Eddie Brock is played in this film by Topher Grace, and we get next to nothing about him. No arc, no motivation, he's just in a couple scenes where he got screwed over by him, got infected with the symbiote, and now he's trying to kill him. And yeah, it really starts to fizzle out by the end. Mary Jane does next to nothing by the end of the trilogy. Harry is a character I don't care about, and Peter is an emotional mess. He doesn't really get an emotional win in these movies. Bad things just happen to him and he just has to deal with it. And yes, that's true to the comics, but that doesn't translate to a movie. And here's something that people bring up, but why does everyone cry in these movies? I swear, when anything sad happens, there's tears. And hey, that's acting, but there are a lot of scenes of this. It's very overdramatic. Anyway, although the third one had bad reviews, it made a lot of money, so a fourth one was in development. But Raimi felt he couldn't meet the 2011 release date, so he backed out. And without his support, Sony decided to reboot the series. Some of the potential helmers for this reboot were Catherine Bigelow and David Fincher, but they made the right decision in having Mark Webb directing them. And thus, The Amazing Spider-Man was created. This film would retell the origin with most of the same characters. And my consensus is that everything the Raimi trilogy did that was bad, these films did better, and vice versa. Peter is played by Andrew Garfield, who plays the character better than Maguire does. He has more charm and a bit of an arc. The arc isn't really that great, mind you. He tries to figure out what happened to his parents and what they were hiding. It doesn't really go all the way, but hey, it's something. He also makes his own webbing in this film, along with a slew of other gadgets to help him, reinvigorating the scientist in him. One of the biggest pluses in this film series, though, is Emma Stone. She plays Gwen Stacy, Peter's love interest. She is way more active than Dunst's Mary Jane is. Gwen does more in one film than Mary Jane does in 3, and her chemistry with Garfield is stellar. I also want to give props to Martin Sheen as Uncle Ben. His care for Peter in this film makes his death much more tragic. The villain in this film, though, the Lizard, played by Rhys Ifan, leaves a lot to be desired. He does have an arc, but he's not that likable. He's just a big CGI monster. Not to mention the fights aren't that good either. There's a fine one in the school, but they don't go that far to be cool. It's an alright film, but it's a step in the right direction, and a lot of people seem to agree. So a second film was greenlit right away, with most of the same people coming back to make it. However, by this point, Sony was planning for more sequels as well as several spin-offs, so the script was retooled a lot. To put it bluntly, this film was screwed from the beginning. The Amazing Spider-Man 2 does the best with what it's got. Garfield and Stone are still great, but their relationship can't improve the movie. Harry Osborn is in this film now, played by Dane DeHaan, and he eats the scenery up. Maybe a little too much. He borders on the line of evil and super goofy. At least we see him in the movie a lot, unlike we did Venom, but it gets worse when he becomes the Green Goblin. You just can't take him seriously. I also can't take Electro, the other villain in this film, seriously, but for a different reason. While DeHaan is so over the top, Jamie Foxx's Electro is somewhat restrained, or he feels restrained. He could have been really cool, but he's just kinda lame. And it doesn't help that his origin is just a retread of other supervillain origins. Electro was a nerdy, uncool guy, then got powers and became psychotic, just like Michelle Pfeiffer in Batman Returns, and just like Jim Carrey in Batman Forever. The only difference is, both of those actors ham their movies up and become highlights, and Fox, again, doesn't do that. The fights are better though. They aren't the best, but they are better. But the big thing to come out of this film is the death of Gwen Stacy. Probably the most famous Spider-Man story ever. Much like the Spider-Man No More storyline, it feels weird to put it in your second film, but considering that they were planning a lot with this reboot, it would be just crazy enough to work. But that didn't end up happening. Like I said, Sony planned on doing a lot with this series, so they set up a bunch of villains for future projects. All these things end up meandering the story a lot, and it's no surprise people hated it. It did make back its money, but viewership of the film dropped exponentially over the months it was in theaters. With this performance, both Mark Webb and Andrew Garfield were uncertain how involved they'd be after a potential third film. And with all these plans in place, there was bound to be something to fall apart. It also didn't help that Marvel was greatly succeeding with their own cinematic universe, one which this reboot took some notes from. However, by the end of 2014, a hack in the Sony system revealed there were talks for Spider-Man to appear in the MCU. But those talks seemed to have broken down, until in early 2015, they announced that Sony and Marvel would be teaming up to bring Spider-Man into the third Captain America film, Civil War, with his own film coming shortly after. And it was a great debut, one which everyone seemed to like. Tom Holland, a young up-and-coming actor, was selected to play Peter, and his first film, Spider-Man Homecoming, came out in 2017, directed by John Watts. His Peter is probably the best so far in live action. He's stumbly and awkward, but he kind of plays that too much into his Spider-Man, and I get it, he's coming into his own, so it's not that big of a deal, though these films give the character way more layers than the others did. Yeah, he's great at what he does, but he's also selfish and sloppy. And the Peter in this film gives me something that the other films didn't: emotion and investment in this character. It also helps that this Spider-Man is a character who exists in a universe with other superheroes. He is constantly trying to prove himself to his mentor, Tony Stark, who doesn't believe he's ready. It gives him an arc, and a good one, and an actual good villain. Michael Keaton plays the Vulture in this film, who is like Peter, a character affected by this universe full of heroes. His motivations to be a villain are believable, and he's very threatening. The design is also very modern. Somehow they made the Vulture look like a realistic character. And the fights between the two are probably the best since Spider-Man 2. Also, no origin this time around, because by this point everybody knows who Spider-Man is and what his origin is. And these films also give Peter a new cast of characters to work off of. Aunt May returns, this time played by the ever-awesome Marissa Tomei. A new character in the films, Ned Leeds, played by Jacob Batalon, is his best friend and ally throughout the movies. And Zendaya also plays MJ. No, this isn't Mary Jane, her name is Michelle, and she's way different than Mary Jane is. It's not a bad interpretation, and fits well as a romantic partner to this Peter. Homecoming is probably my favorite live-action Spider-Man film, and it really kind of brings him full circle. Holland's Peter Parker has to step up and be the hero that he wants to be, rather than be like someone else. And in this world full of heroes, Peter can still be your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man looking after the little guy. But now with Peter in this universe, it means he's affected by other things. In 2018 and 2019, some extraterrestrial shenanigans took place, and to make a long story short, Tony Stark died, leaving Peter directionless and pretty much thrust into stepping up. That's where we see him in Spider-Man Far From Home. While it isn't as good as Homecoming, it's still a good sequel to this Spider-Man. Instead of everyone telling him that he should be the next Iron Man, Peter wants to take things slow. He wants to confess to MJ and just live his life. However, he's brought in to help Nick Fury, along with a warrior from a different dimension named Mysterio, face off against a bunch of villains called Elementals. Probably my biggest gripe with the movie is the stuff with Nick Fury. He's kinda just there, and he does some weird stuff. And while that would be explained by the end of the movie, it kinda affects the whole movie. Luckily, Mysterio, played by Jake Gyllenhaal, picks up the slack. Because, well, anyone who knows Mysterio knows that he's a villain, with his whole deal being illusions. And sure enough, he does trick Peter into giving him some tech Tony left behind. Mysterio's actually my favorite Spider-Man villain, because he requires Peter to rely on his spider sense and figure out what's real and what isn't. And that happens in this film, to great effect. Mysterio is threatening and puts Peter on his toes, and his actions leave serious repercussions. Although Mysterio dies by the end of the film, his last trick is to make the world believe that Spider-Man killed him and reveal that Peter is the webhead, courtesy of a clearly Alex Jones-inspired J. Jonah Jameson. If there is a problem that I have with Far From Home, it's that Peter doesn't really grow as a character. It's just the same lesson he has to learn of great power and great responsibility he has to have repeated to him in the other films. But Far From Home does give him the girl, and although it does put him out of his comfort zone by stopping what is seemingly a world-ending threat, it works here with Mysterio in play. And that's one of a few reasons why a lot of people don't like this one, which I don't get. Especially since the next movie greatly involves him stopping a world-ending threat. Speaking of which, Far From Home leads directly into No Way Home and deals with the repercussions of Mysterio's last illusion for about 10 minutes. Yeah, the whole thing about Peter seemingly killing him is kind of forgotten about after a certain point to make way for other plot threads. With the reveal of Peter's identity, it screws up the lives of his friends and family. So to fix it, he meets the sorcerer Dr. Strange to make a spell so that everyone forgets he's Spider-Man. However, Peter's own selfishness and sloppiness sort of does the opposite of the spell mid-cast, bringing people who know he's Spider-Man from other universes. In the lead up to this movie, it was rumored that Jamie Foxx would return in this film as Electro. It was a rumor, but Jamie Foxx sort of jumped the gun about it and posted it on Instagram. And as the movie approached, rumors would soon become reality, as the villains of the film were revealed to be Electro, played by Jamie Foxx, the Lizard, voiced by Rhys Ifan, Sandman, voiced by Thomas Hayden Church, Dr. Octopus, played by Alfred Molina, and the Green Goblin, played by Willem Dafoe. And while it is initially cool that all these villains are coming back, when you start to think about it, it falls apart easily. There really is no real reason to bring all these villains back. Their arcs are done, most of them died. They do try their best to justify it by curing them, which raises even more questions, but this isn't that type of film. This is a big finale type film with an epic story and a bunch of surprises. And while I don't think this Spider-Man has really earned that finale, the biggest surprise of all is near the end. That initial Instagram post by Jamie Foxx contained art of Electro taking on 3 Spider-Man. And even if that didn't slip, rumors of all the live-action Spider-Man being in the film were spouted for months up until it was released. And I gotta give the marketing team props. They kept us guessing to the end. But I should have known better, because what do these companies like?
Here comes the money.
Here we go. Money talk.
Here comes the money.
They like to make money. So of course, Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire return as Peter in this film. And in watching this film again, I do think it's cool to see all these Peters interact with each other. However, I felt their scenes kind of ringed out hollow. And the reason why is because these moments are edited in film so that they can leave room for the people in the theater to have a reaction. And sure enough, they did. It's not surprising, this is how capitalism works, inspiring other people to watch the other Spider-Man films, and it's something that Marvel has done since, well, Spider-Man was created. It's a clever way to advertise other books by crossing over and setting up stories for other characters. Thing is, though, I don't care about these Spider-Men. I don't care about Maguire Spider-Man or Garfield Spider-Man. I care about Holland Spider-Man. And I could care less about the villains or the multiverse. But for all its flaws, No Way Home does seem to bring the character back to his roots. For now. They just announced a fourth film with Sony and Marvel seemingly on different opinions of how to approach it. But the future seems bright for the MCU Spider-Man, and I think it's the best the character has done so far. Is it perfect? No, I still feel we're a little ways away from the best live-action Spider-Man, but Holland is definitely the closest to the character. Look, I know I have said what many would consider slanderous in this video, but some of you may be asking why I don't like Spider-Man that much, and before this video, I couldn't tell you. But after watching all these films and comparing them and seeing what is good and what isn't, here is my opinion. I do like Spider-Man. But I don't think Spider-Man has evolved as a character since 1973. That's the year Gwen Stacy died. I think Spider-Man and Marvel are stuck in this area where the most major thing that has happened to Peter Parker is one of the most important moments in comic history. They still think he should be sad about Gwen, and yes, he can be sad, but he should also move on. Some comic writers do evolve the character in some way, but all the time they usually put him back to where he was before, as the same Paragon who's a down-on-his-luck kid with real-world problems. That doesn't change the character, but that's what people know, and it's what makes money, so Spider-Man has to go back to that status quo all the time. Whether it be due to him being replaced by a clone, him switching bodies, or making a deal with the literal devil, Spider-Man will always return to that same person he was back when he was the big moneymaker of Marvel. He always seems to have to learn the same 6-letter phrase that has been echoed in every other piece of Spider-Man media since he was created. And because this is the popular perception of the character, the movies portray it that way. Until Homecoming came out and did something different, which was good. Then they kind of returned him to being the same way in subsequent films, but hey, there's a plus. I just want Peter to win and be happy because I do like this character and I'm so sick of the same stuff over and over and over again. This is kind of touched upon a bit on Peter's character in Into the Spider-Verse in a metatextual kind of way, at least from my perspective. That Peter is stuck and he can't move on and evolve. It's only when he meets Miles when he starts to take back control of his life. And he is my favorite Peter Parker portrayed in a movie. Is that an excuse to just watch Into the Spider-Verse? Yes, it is. You can check it out at your local library. But despite all of that, I do think that the best live-action Spider-Man film will come one day. One that everyone can agree is the best. When is that going to happen? I don't know. Probably not anytime soon, but I'm looking forward to it when it does come out. Back to better films next week as we prepare for a special project coming soon. An actual good comic book adaptation. With Western Media Center, I'm Joey Haskins, and I'll see you all next time.